Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is who stole Guy Fieri's and Sammy Hagar's tequila with Jessica McFate. How's it going, Jessica?
Wonderful. I'm so thrilled to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you about this topic. So, Jessica, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yes, my name is Jessica McFate. I work with Babel Street, and I'm based out of Washington, D.C.
So what do you guys do at Babel Street?
We are a threat intelligence firm based in public and commercial data, providing solutions to mitigate risk to government and commercial customers in the U.S. and worldwide.
So who's your ideal customer again?
Companies and governments that are trying to protect themselves from threats that come from bad actors.
And so is this considered cybersecurity? A lot of what we talk on my podcast about freight fraud and cybersecurity and then the cargo theft. Is it all of the above?
Well, it's all of the above, but we focus mostly on what we call context signals. So we use technology to find indicators of the intent and capability and access and placement of bad actors to help our customers anticipate threats and avoid them in the first place.
Yeah. And we talked for a little while before we hit the record button. Governments, obviously, I have to be very concerned about their information, but the multinational companies also have to. And I know we're being told by the government, don't sell to certain actors. Make sure you're not buying stuff from certain places. And now domestically, we have cargo theft and cybersecurity and freight fraud. And I can tell you, if you put me in charge of a logistics or supply chain operation today, my first priority would be security and for all the stuff we just talked about. And that would be higher than cost, which is crazy because that's always what you're worried about. But if you're a big company, your data and your reputation is worth a lot more than saving a few bucks on a supplier or a logistics move.
That's really what we're seeing too, is that there's this upending of the way to choose a vendor. And we're now seeing that anticipating vendor threats, not vulnerabilities and not is the Suez going to get blocked by a container vessel that beached itself. We're actually seeing threats that come from actors who are intending the vendor harm. And that can be anticipated, but it's a bit of a paradigm shift, and it is a paradigm shift to see it inside the United States.
So you're working with mostly large companies, I take it, and governments?
So large and small, some who are doing business with governments and some that are simply trying to get business done with compliance as a goal. But they're also recognizing that there is a correlation between those constraints that they're given by policies and the threats that they're also trying to avoid. So there's the convergence that we're seeing now, particularly around logistics, which touches everyone, really are the bleeding heartbeat of how everybody else's business gets done, including the business of governments.
Yep. So the name of your company is Babel Street. Please explain. You had to give me the education, but please give my audience that explanation too.
Oh, certainly. Our company's come a long way since its inception, but it was founded with the expectation that intelligence, which is my original craft, I started off in government, I've been out of government with technology companies for some time now. Intelligence is not only the purview of governments, and it's not really about secrets. It's about information that supports decision. And there's a lot of information that supports decision out in the public sphere, but it comes in many different shapes and sizes and in many different languages. So Babel Street is a reference to the Tower of Babel and technology that gives users access to all linguistic content.
Yep. And what is Tower of Babel?
It is the point of origin of human language dispersing out so that we can't all communicate easily.
Got it. That makes sense. So I get it now. I know it seems as if the problems we're chasing are in the physical world, but more and more they're in the digital world first. So when somebody says we had cargo theft, we're going to talk about the tequila heist in a moment. That manifests itself in the physical world, obviously. That you can't move tequila digitally. But it all started online, and we'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, and again, the bar just goes so high. Again, if I was at a big supply chain company, or if I was a logistics CEO, security would be my top priority right now. As bad as the market has been for companies, you have to focus on this.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those situations where the cost can really become very sharp and very high. So for a little bit of cost up front to do a new kind of vetting above and beyond due diligence and above and beyond watching global supply chains for throughput, you really have to make sure that your vendors are reliable.
Yes. Jessica, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined Babel Street and why you joined Babel Street.
Oh, certainly. I started off in Houston, Texas, born and raised, and decided to join the Army and went to West Point. And the towers fell during my sophomore year. And I found myself, yes. So I spent the first 8 years of my career on active duty, deploying back and forth to Iraq and Afghanistan. I was an intelligence officer. But then I got out and became a research director at a think tank in Washington, D.C., focused upon national security policy. Did quite a lot of research on terrorist groups, specifically ISIS, but this time from public data, and really came to this conclusion that intelligence is for everyone, and that the technology that's needed is really that which brings context into everyone's decision cycle. So there's this relationship between the kinds of information that are specific to an industry and the kinds of information that tell you about the context of how your situation is evolving that can give you room to anticipate. And what we've done with our vendor vetting solutions at Babel Street is to really bring this understanding of global threats to companies and to bring a better understanding of how companies need to operate to the U.S. government and other global governments who really haven't grown up with the same understanding of throughput and priorities and really what makes the world go round when it comes to the global economy. And really bringing those two things together for economic threats is something that we're seeing happen really in and around global logistics. So my hat is very much off to you, and this is an amazing podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's only good because I get good people to come on it.
It's an honor.
This challenge that we have, it seems, this isn't a little bit of a reach to say military intelligence applied to business. But I think when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. As you were talking about your time in military intelligence, by the way, thank you so much for your service. I've never served, but I do watch TV. And I remember when they were trying to find, I think it was Osama bin Laden, the challenge is he didn't have a digital footprint. So now they're saying, okay, he doesn't have a mobile phone. He doesn't send emails. They were using all paper to get to him, if I'm not. But at some point, they find his second or third in command has a mobile phone and has a digital signature. And you see them go to this place enough. And I thought, that was a long time. I don't think most of us could live for 15 minutes without our phones and our digital footprint that we transmit out to the world.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that really is the genesis of the threat environment. You mentioned cyber in the context of physical threats a moment ago. And if we think about all the different privacy laws that we have in this country and also the model in Europe, all of that policy was born of a recognition that is almost so known now that we've almost forgotten it, that our private data isn't private. In fact, there's a market for it. So we make this trade-off decision every day about how badly do we want to know our blood pressure every minute, or how much are we willing to live not being able to have access to the news, and it's a trade-off.
I got my Ancestry DNA, and a very smart relative of mine said, oh, I would never do that because now they have your DNA. Like, I go, who has my DNA? He goes, now they can pin a crime on you. I go, I think if they wanted to badly enough, they're going to be able to.
That's right. And listen, no solution to the digital signature is right for everybody, but everybody needs to be making a conscious choice.
Yeah. And I did some business in the past in China and in Thailand and Mexico. And I can tell you, you bump up against security threats all the time. When I was, and not just from terrorists. So I always think I was in Thailand for work and automotive. And I remember they said, oh, we have a brand new supplier, much cheaper for this product. And then I was like, okay, tell me about it. So then I knew what the cost was domestically here in the US. And then they said, oh, it's a sister company, so it's just a pass through. And I said, what's the price? And it was way lower. And I go, why in the world would it be way lower? It's made in Europe. And I was like, it makes no sense that it'd be way lower. I go, we're not going to work with them until I understand. I don't even want to talk to them until I understand more. And then at some point, somebody said, the ownership is different here than over. I said, it's a European company doing business in the US. And now I don't know why the price would be that much lower here. It turned out it was like a distributorship. And then some point somebody said, they might be related to drug smuggling and maybe this is laundering money. I was like, oh, okay. Good point to bring up at some point that we're going to go into business with drug dealers because they have to clean up their money. And for the company I was working with, the reputational risk, the safety of the people who are involved, it's horrific. And you could just step in it because the exciting part of saving all that money on the car.
You're absolutely right. As a researcher who's also trying to keep up with the pace of business, you also can't sit there and investigate every single vendor manually. And you just don't have time. You're trying to get your business done, and cost savings is a benefit and is not always going to kill you. So how do you make it possible to screen all of your options, your alternatives, your current vendors continuously? That's a good job for technology. But it's a good job of technology that can keep up with adjusting frameworks for where the threat is shifting. And the threat is shifting to vendors, specifically logisticians. And it's now a combination of organized crime and better techniques that are digital and GPT enabled, and a confluence of what is touching organized crime. And just as a quick preview, it's not only cartels anymore. It's cartels that have wonderful business alignment with other adversaries of the U.S. government that are part of those policies that we all have to abide by. They work together.
So today's topic is who stole Guy Fieri's and Sammy Hagar's tequila. I was just at a conference and everyone was chit-chatting about this, and I came up with this slick title. And you said, I don't actually know who, but I can describe how it happened and who most likely was involved. Please give us a sense, first, what happened, and then how it happened.
Certainly. Just to paraphrase, I really am very grateful to them for giving all of us the cautionary tale. They didn't have to publicize what happened to them. And because they did, we can really up the ante of our collective awareness of how the threat environment is changing. So in this instance, what it sounds like is that their cargo successfully and relatively securely made its way from point of origin in Mexico to the U.S. border. But then when it changed hands among logistics firms inside the U.S., a double spoof happened.
Wait, what is a spoof?
So a spoof would be one part of a transaction, one party to a transaction. And in this case, either the logistician hired by the tequila company and its subcontractor, one or the other is spoofing and pretending to be real when they're not. And in this case, it's a double spoof, and the maneuver of pretending to be real induced the reliable intermediary, the logistics company working directly for the tequila company, to hand off the cargo and, in essence, to give it away to a bad actor who was going to steal it.
That's humiliating. Somebody says, hey, did you lose that tequila? Yeah, I gave it to Bob and Tom. They're a good group of guys. We were talking about the game last night, and then they drove away with, I think it was $1 million worth of tequila.
$1 million. And in so doing, it's not even clear that the drivers of the trucks were witting to the crime. They're just driving. So it's a very organized activity, and it is premeditated. I think something you were talking about before that I would just allude to is a shift from expectation of just incidents opportunistic crime to premeditated.
Yeah, the strategic, sophisticated.
That this was an operation, and there are a number of candidates who would have had access and placement who are up to the task. And it's just a little bit shocking that they did it on the U.S. side of the operation. And we need to know that.
I should probably mention also, I think most people will know, but Sammy Hagar is a rock star. He used to be in Van Halen and some other bands. He's out and about all the time. And Guy Fieri, also I call him Guy Fieri, he is a chef and he's on TV. I think he's got a show, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. I had to stop watching it because it made me hungry. Every time I watched, I was eating. But anyway, very well-known actors, or not actors, Hollywood people. And by law, as a celebrity, they have to have a tequila brand. So they didn't have any choice but to have the tequila.
I know.
They had a choice not to get it stolen. So what would, in that transaction where they just loaded up 2 trucks of $1 million worth of tequila, what would you guys have done to prevent that?
Certainly. We've created a web-accessible technology solution for our customers to be able to look at and screen and also discover threats around and also investigate, depending upon the workflow, a whole population of current or potential vendors, and to be able to monitor them continuously, even receive alerts as to changes to their threat posture. And I think in this instance, it would have been valuable for the trusted logistics firm working for the tequila company to have had this capability to screen for indicators of sketchiness of the company that they were going to be providing their business to. And some things that you can look for, they may not be flashing signals of a compliance issue. They're not on a fact watch list, but what does that company's financials look like? Have they done any business in the last 2 years? Is their US DOT number still active? That person who emailed you, does that person look like they're connected to the company on LinkedIn? And if these things don't immediately flash forward with legitimacy, events like this theft point out to us that it may be really simple indicators like that are your first indicator that an investigation is worth a few more minutes of your time. And we need to catch those.
So there's a number of, I'll call them vetting companies out there in the transportation space, and they will help make sure that trucking company is legitimate and has the right insurance and has the proper licenses to move your freight. But it's still happening. And I think the nature of what we're talking about is it's going to upgrade. It's going to keep upgrading. And I think all you want to be is not the slowest one. You don't want to be the lowest hanging fruit. And somebody described it not so long ago to me as that old joke where campers, 2 guys see bear coming, and the one guy's putting his shoes on. And he says, "What are you putting your shoes on?" He goes, "Because we're going to run." And he goes, "You can't outrun a bear." He goes, "I don't have to outrun a bear. I just have to outrun you." And I think about that here is the creeps who are out there are going to be going after the low-hanging fruit. If they truly want to steal from you, they can do it. But just don't be the easy mark.
No, that's exactly right. And you're bringing me back to something my mother taught me before I joined the Army. Is she wanted me when I was in public at night to make sure that I looked like a hard target. Her phrases, not an Army-ism, a mom-ism. And if you're not worth it to the bad actor, that's in many ways your best defense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I talked to somebody about this not so long ago, and he said, this is regarding cybersecurity. He said, "Can somebody break into your house?" And I said, "Sure. Yeah, they could. I live in a very safe area, but yeah, they could get in." He said, "If you got an alarm system, could they break into your house?" I said, "Yeah." Ideally, the police would be there pretty quick. He said, "Yeah," he said, "but are you absolutely positively safe if you have an alarm system?" I said, "No." He goes, "What else?" I go, "I guess I could get guards." He goes, "They could bring a SWAT team." And I said, "Yeah." But getting back to it, you're making it harder, and all of a sudden it's just not worth it. But if somebody truly wants to get into my house and they have unlimited resources, they're getting in. And that's the same with our freight. That's the same with our warehouses. We're seeing this. I've been at 3 conferences lately, one in Long Beach at the port. That was the top priority. Everyone was talking about it. And then I was in Washington at a conference last week, CSCMP. Same thing. Everyone was talking about cybersecurity, freight fraud, and cargo theft. And they're all kind of first cousins.
Absolutely. And it's honest, it's a wonderful reminder, and it's refreshing that there's certain due diligence that is specific to each industry that is already the high bar. So when we start to see adversaries adapting to that high bar, we've got to adapt up a level. And a couple of adaptations that we're seeing right now that the tequila heist represent to is an uptick in sophisticated correspondence that is illegitimate, but you have to really squint to make sure that you don't miss it.
They're getting very sophisticated with that, aren't they?
They're getting sophisticated. And I think there's a cross-pollination of tactics from different bad actor groups who are in contact. For those of us who are also working in a national security space, you'll see things like drone techniques that move from Europe to Mexico or Colombia. And, how did that happen so quickly? We've either got copycats or we've got contact, but either way, the TTP has moved. So influence is manifest and bad actors are adapting. And there's this cycle.
So I don't want to put you on the spot here, but if you had to guess who stole this, it was sophisticated. It wasn't a whole bunch of kids. This wasn't opportunistic. This was somebody spoofed. Is there a chance that the thieves were inside the ERP waiting for this? Or do you think it was related more to the second transportation company that got involved?
No, I would say that the tequila company got targeted before their shipment left point of origin as a juicy target. And that it's actually proof positive that the company looked like a harder target on the Mexican side of the transaction and looked less secure on the U.S. side, that they would choose to plan a heist for that which looked like a harder target. So I would say it's an entity in Mexico, but that doesn't narrow it down.
How did they get inside this? How did they do this? Was this phishing attacks that they?
I don't think so. I don't think that you have to have access to a company's digital infrastructure to make them feel secure in handing their cargo off to you.
Yeah, God, that seems like a lower bar. I feel like somebody really screwed up by.
No, it's more like human engineering. In fraud cases, if you think about the people who are calling up my mom now and trying to get her to give away her bank account information, they're sweet. And they're sometimes very influential. The techniques are not necessarily
they're as old as
that
time.
High tech.
My mom is in a garden club, and she said after one of their meetings, it's really stuck with me. And she said, a lady who's in the garden club, she goes, very smart, retired, was an executive, did very well for herself. She got up and said after, she goes, I want to talk to everybody real quick. And she talked about how she was defrauded out of a lot of money. And she said, I'm so embarrassed and humiliated by this. And she's an older woman, did not want to admit this, but she says, I couldn't live with myself not saying something to my friends about it. And I thought, yeah, that was brave, because nobody wants to be the one saying, oh yeah, I got scammed, especially as you get older. But in our business, I went to the cybersecurity conference last year in Cleveland, Ohio, right across from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it was NMFTA, National Motor Freight Transportation Association. Virtually everybody there had been hacked. This was after the fact, I think. I shouldn't say that. I don't know that, but I know a number of the people who were there had been hacked. And somebody said to me earlier today regarding cybersecurity, says it's not if, it's when, because top companies are getting hit. There's vulnerabilities. The bit more complex the systems, the more there's vulnerabilities.
Yes, but it's still surmountable. So I think that, as you said, like putting your boots on, I'd like to think of it as all ships rising. We're all going to get away from the bear if we all put our shoes on. But I also think that there is a collective awareness, but everybody's really got to be very diligent at a level that we haven't really had technology or service solutions for yet. I do think this is a solvable problem, but we do also have to regard this as a very intentional adversary. Even if it's organized crime targeting a company, it's still an adversarial get into the mind of the bad guy.
You have a software. Is it a separate platform that I'm going into, or is it connected to my software? How am I interacting with Babel Street?
So that's a great question. There are really three big ways to interact. Our marquee platform is called Insights, and it is web accessible. You get a login. All you need is the internet and a browser, and you can operate on it with searches that make sense to all of us despite our industries. Another way is to send our data, that what we curate that lets you anticipate threats of all different kinds and just screen your companies with them. That kind of data can be available in different infrastructures to combine with your data. And I think the third way is to query it through different kinds of APIs to hook it up to third-party infrastructure as you wish. So we really do want to meet customers where they're at. Our experts are obviously also a part of the deal. We want to partner with you for your security.
Yeah, and somebody said this to me, and I want you to elaborate on this. Somebody said to me last year that we were talking about zero trust in systems, meaning you're constantly having to prove who you are in the system. And I remember him making the point that a CEO of a big company said, "Why can't I get access to this?" They go, "Because you don't need it." But anyway, that gentleman said, sometimes we're dealing with state actors. That would be China mostly, but it could be North Korea, it could be Iran, it could be, who am I missing there?
Russia,
of course.
A number of the cartels and other entities are designated as sponsors of terror.
So he said, number one, it's the state actors. Number two is the for-profit, the people who are breaking into your system so they can hold you ransom. And then he said, there's last but not least is these hacktivists who want you to stop building your plant on this land or whatever. So is that who Babel Street sees right now, or is there something larger?
That's a great question. All of the above. I think the larger thing that we see is that you really can't put one threat actor into only one of those silos anymore.
Oh,
because
there's
there really
overlap, of course.
It's an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of dodging law enforcement, of dodging industry regulation, and it's a collaboration. So really got to treat it as something where you can't necessarily simplify who you're up against. It's more that you knew who you were up against in Mexico yesterday. Now you've really got to understand that person's techniques may be changing because they're in contact with Hezbollah or with China or with Russia. And you have to know all those threats. So again, it's this complex landscape that nevertheless, you got to get it into the screening workflow, and keeping the complexity intact in your solution is really where we specialize.
So is this to prevent me from buying something from someone, or is this to prevent me from selling something? Because I know the State Department I worked with a large multinational, and they were told, don't sell to these people on this list. And they were manually dealing with it. And the State Department was kind of chasing them down every day saying, don't do this, don't do that. And what they were saying to me was, this company tried to buy from us in the Middle East. We didn't sell it to them. Then they tried in the United States through a separate organization that we tied back. And then they tried in Latin America. And I was thinking, they only have to win one time. And again, the State Department was right on top of the company. And there wasn't an easy tool that just said, flag this as a potential bad actor.
No, I agree with you completely. Our approach to this is to identify those industrial ecosystems that are the express priorities of adversaries to be more devious to get at you. And if you belong to these industries, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is everybody's interested in helping you. And there's, among other things, also a potential for alignment of governments that are also trying to get around the same issues that can be a real benefit. The bad news is that the adversaries are going to be a little bit more devious than normal. And logistics are one of those industries. Semiconductors are another one. Gallium is another one. It's a finite list, but I would say that the adversaries are going to be clever in your space. And where shipbuilding is concerned, China in particular has a real advantage. Where energy transfer is concerned, there's a whole shadow fleet that's emerged to get around specific sanctions that are targeting Russia's ability to fund its war in Ukraine. And nevertheless, you really can't think about it as being something that doesn't hit American shores and doesn't hit other modalities of logistics. Quite the contrary. Smart warehouses, smart cranes. A lot of the digital infrastructure, it's not actually about a phishing attack. It's actually about the same thing that makes that device on your finger a point of access. And you just have to think about that as an industrial scale and just be eyes wide open to your discoverability and ask tough questions. So I want to hearken on something that I think we were talking about when we first got a chance to meet, Joe, that the real protection is human relationships.
Right.
Such an insight. If you can talk to that person and they don't sound right to you, that may be the proof that you need and you have agency.
I think when I think about the transportation space, we became very digital over the last decade. And then we allowed transactions to happen without human interaction. So it's like Match.com for trucking. So I connected that load to that truck, and it's very efficient because there was nobody had to talk in between. But that also is a problem because we didn't talk. That conversation we thought is inefficient, but it was also the conversation that prevented you from identifying a bad actor. And they're out there. They're out there. And I heard recently somebody said there was one location, one address that had 2,000 truck licenses at the same. So
yes.
Basically the 2,000 authorities at one location, you're like, that's a little bit of a red flag.
That's right. And I think one of the great things about this community discussion that the Tequila Heist, I think, really heralds, it's so courageous to notify the community of a technique that has been successful, is that one of the best things that we can do is flag an approach technique so that we can all have our eyes out for it. And that's something that we do in technology firms, is to turn that into an algorithm. So, hey, there's another kind of risk flag. Find this everywhere else in the data where it exists, because that's weird. And those are good uses of digital solutions from our side. Same as you're saying, there can be efficiencies from technology, but they should really be enabling a human judgment and a human conversation.
So in this scenario, would Sammy and Guy's tequila company be a good fit for Babel Street?
Oh, we would be honored. Absolutely.
So now they picked a transportation company. I guess they'd have to be very, very direct to their customer and say, hey, look, you have to work within our parameters.
Yes, and I think that you can really flex what you expect from your vendors. I mean, maybe that there's nothing untoward about their logistics provider, but do you want to make a condition what they have to report to you about who they vend to? And maybe sometimes you fire a customer. And I think just feeling empowered to make judgments is my encouragement.
Yeah, and I'm an automotive guy originally, and we have tier one suppliers are all more or less publicly traded huge companies. The tier twos are often billion-dollar companies, and tier threes are a little smaller. Then you get to like tier fours that are smaller yet. And if you're an automaker, your brands mean everything to you, and it's hard to vet 4 levels down. Where did they get that? And where are those parts being made? And what you really can't afford is that potentially opened your doors to cybersecurity threats, but also brand reputation, where somebody says, oh, I guess so-and-so's now working with Iran. Not deliberately. That was a supplier of a supplier is on Iran, and that's how it happened. And again, you're going to be in trouble with the government, but there's also the internet's going to hear about it.
That's right. And honestly, it feels like just so many constraints, like a system of inequalities. How are you going to operate inside of this small little zone where you're compliant? But if you flip the card as to all those behaviors that have caused one of those entities to be on a government exclude list, it's also doing a little bit of this homework for you. There's a whole lot of danger around that one.
So I'm assuming that the companies, if I was a pharma company, I almost don't have a choice. I have to have a product like Babel Street. I'm assuming any defense contractor, multinational, I think the automotive companies, anybody who's got that big supply chain automatically has to get this. And I would not be surprised going forward if some of them don't start saying, in addition to SOC 2 compliance, I want you to have this. Because your weakness becomes my weakness because we work together.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that there are these industry adjacencies where one is going to secure itself and it's going to turn around and realize that, but my warehouse isn't secure, so now I'm going to require something new. So the industry, the logistics industry, may also find itself getting these kinds of requirements placed on them by their customers because their customers have come to the need. And the good news is I think that there is this critical mass of awareness of the problem. But there is this new crossover. And I think the crossover is two new things. One of them is that the approach of the adversary is becoming much more human sounding because of these GPT languages. And the second is that the adversaries are converging. So the things you were used to seeing and the things that I was used to seeing doing another line of work are becoming part of the same problem set. And hey, I think if we get ahead of it, then we'll be prepared.
Yep. So let me take a little detour here, since you're an intelligence person. That horrible murders out in Idaho, there was that Brian Kohlberger who killed those kids. Horrible. I heard two lawyers. One was a forensic lawyer, so she was an expert in it. And she said, we don't have serial murders like we used to have because we have DNA. We have mobile phones everywhere. And by the way, the moron Brian Kohlberger took his mobile phone with him just in case he had to update Instagram while he was out. And then cameras everywhere. And I thought, oh, yeah. And it seems, we're with all of these kind of converging that you would just see a lot less crime. But it's changed. It's just changed where it's gone. How are these technologies? Are you guys getting involved with that kind of stuff?
So I would say
It's you guys are more on the intelligence side, but I'm just wondering how it interacts.
so. It's interesting. This is going to be a very nerdy thing to say, but I hope you'll permit me that insight has a tendency to be spherical. I may not be focused with my team on serial murder, but the idea that a technology like genetically enabled forensics is tied to a kind of gallium-based semiconductor that's specifically modified to genetic analysis does connect to something else I was doing. And as you're talking through that, I would say the closest place where we do have a connection is in the analysis of what is contested and vulnerable in telecommunications. And when I first got into this shift in business from studying ISIS to studying economic threats, it was 2018, and TSMC had just completely
That's one semiconductor, right?
Yes. So they had come up with this new fabrication process to do 7 nanometer semiconductor fabrication, completely undercut the Chinese market, which was up at 14 nanometers. And it became a huge upset for every industry that is downstream of semiconductors, which is everybody, just like everybody's connected to the logistics. And we concurrently saw the first mentions of threats in surveillance, middleware, and devices from Huawei. And those two dynamics have not changed. They're both still there. And just, I think the assurance, too, is that the bad actors who are trying to commit crimes are going to be adapting tactically, and you're going to see different kinds of attack techniques rapidly form. But the overall threat picture, it's evolving cohesively. And we just need to understand that logistics in the U.S. is vulnerable to more than organized crime now. It's vulnerable to others.
Yeah, I was at a conference the other day, and I saw that Home Depot has put in some technology inside their power tools where people are walking out with power tools. And I think most national organizations like that said, I don't want camera footage of my people fighting with thieves because something could go wrong. Somebody could end up dead and go, hey, do you see the Home Depot guy kill the kid who was shoplifting? But they basically put, I think, some sort of Bluetooth in there with basically, if it wasn't paid for, that power tool doesn't work. So we're starting to see technologies enable. I talked to the Bloodhound tracking device company recently. They put sensors inside of shipping containers, and they can tell you whether it's got fentanyl in it or if it has people in it, and they just keep getting better and better. They'll see if that container the door's open, obviously the lights go on, but now they're hiding the devices so you don't necessarily see them. So I think the technologies are the container's been a dumb container for a long time. I think we're going to see smart containers.
I think that's wonderful, just so long as you know what semiconductor is in it.
Yes. So walk me through, if you don't mind, like a case study of somebody you guys work with who you prevented a challenge, one of these challenges that we've talked about.
Certainly. So I think in one instance, it was a scam. And I mention it in specific because it's what I thought about when...
What kind of company was it?
In this case, a contractor to a public entity, but that they received an email that sounded very legitimate. And they simply asked us, can you tell us what you think about this company? And in this case, they didn't have our technology yet. And so we ran it. And within a couple hours, we came back with, look, initially we thought this, but these three things didn't look right. So we dug further, and this is what we found, and we recommend you be careful. We don't think that's legitimate. And in other instances, we're running whole populations of vendors.
If you're doing their job, there is no headline.
Oh, that's true. But I think you're right. Let me give something perhaps a little bit broader. Where do companies that are persecuting Uyghurs do business outside of Zhejiang, China? And those kinds of broadcasted messages that keep us all safer are things that other entities would just be very glad to see broadcast.
Yeah, this is so insidious because, again, you don't know until it's too late. And I think we're talking about these guy Fieri and Sammy Hagar. It's too late after the theft, and they might become a customer of Babel Street after the fact, but what you're saying is let's be proactive. And I would not be surprised at all if the federal government and pharma companies and automotive companies, food companies say, this is table stakes. We cannot afford a terrorist activity. We can't afford the hijacking of our business, which is what's happened in some cases.
That's exactly right. So what we're really doing is taking what is traditional for compliance and upgrading it to compliance, protect, and anticipate. Because this is an information environment that can be at your fingertips, and it doesn't have to disrupt your workflow. If it's disrupting your workflow, then we're not a very good technology company. But if it fits your workflow and makes you faster and safer, then that's a good standard.
Yeah, again, the bar just gets higher and higher every day. And when I was at the cybersecurity conference last year, there was somebody from the White House who spoke and said, during COVID, we saw supply chains with issues. Now, for the most part, they worked, but we found some places where they were brittle. We had all the ships stuck out in port of Long Beach in LA. And this guy said, so China in particular, but all of the state actors went hog wild attacking logistics and supply chain In the past, they'd done it, but they said it was not a priority. Now it feels like it's much more of a priority because they saw, hey, Americans go crazy with the thought that they might have toilet paper at Costco.
Absolutely. What we used to say in the Army is that logistics are the American way of war. And I think it's also the American way of life. We have high standards in logistics, and many thanks to you and your community for keeping us all at such high standards that we're very tough.
Yeah. And logistics was more or less invented by the militaries. And it's little doubt that's how we won the war, World War II for sure, and others. We were able to get the goods and the people where they needed to be faster and with more.
And we were adaptive. So I think that there's this idea that we can proactively be adaptive faster than those who are trying to adapt to get us. No, that's empowering too. We can be clever.
Yep. So I'm going to summarize. Then I want to get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend, Jessica McFate. We're talking about who stole Guy Fieri's and Sammy Hagar's tequila. So those two guys, they lost $1 million worth of tequila. They were defrauded for cargo theft. And it happened through spoofing. I was at a conference last week in Baltimore, just outside of D.C. in Maryland, and CSCMP, everyone was talking about it. And no guns. No, this was very sophisticated. They just spoofed and then showed up and picked up the booze and stole it. And this is happening more and more. The sophisticated, whether it's organized crime or the cartels or for-profit companies, who knows who's doing it, but it's happening a lot more. And I think the bar is also rising because the government and multinational companies, they don't want this kind of bad press. They also don't want the chance that somebody gets into their supply chains and really does some damage. Jessica and the team over at Babel Street, they have a solution. They have a due diligence and screening that gets rid of that operational risk in a way that is really inspired by, and I think comes from military intelligence, which is, I know we spend a lot on it, so I hope it's really good. Anyway, put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on the topic, Jessica?
Certainly. Well, I would say a few things. First of all, Babel Street is here to help. We have a marquee vendor vetting solution that should make your life easier rather than harder. We can look at your whole vendor population. We can look at all your potential vendors, and we can continuously monitor them for the kinds of threats that are changing every week and keep you at the upper bow wave of all the new information and partner with you and keep you safe. Our solutions are easy to use. We have presence internationally, and we do preference those solutions that are aligned to the interests of the United States government. And we're really here for you in logistics because we think that you're the tip of the spear and the bleeding heart of our country's security and prosperity. So thank you for what you do.
I love it. I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website. Any other links you and the go-to-market team give me, I'll make sure I put those in the show notes so people can reach out and talk to you. You guys going to any conferences coming up here?
We're at industry conferences all the time. We just finished up the AUSA conference in Washington, D.C., but we're also all over the country. We have positions in California and Cleveland and New York and Texas and D.C., and would be thrilled to meet you where you are.
I love it. Jessica, thank you so much for taking the time.
You as well. Thank you.
And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.